If I tell you Hong Kong is in this picture, can you find it? This is the Hong Kong Island, the Kowloon Peninsula, and the New Territories. The rest is Shenzhen. This is a picture of Xi'an County established in 1573. There are two circles on the map, a big one and a small one. There are two fortresses. On the 450th anniversary of Xin'an County, I visit these two fortresses in Shenzhen, where the stories of both Shenzhen and Hong Kong started.
Hello, I'm Yan Yan. I'm in Shenzhen, Guangdong Province, outside the fortress built in 1394 against the pirates. In a series of earlier videos, I visited 6 similar fortresses in Fujian Province and Zhejiang Province. Today I'll visit 2 in Shenzhen. 6 centuries of Shenzhen's history has been compressed into these 2 fortresses, from sea-ban and isolation to opening up to the world. It rhymes with China's declining and rising up again.
In the 14th century, displaced Japanese samurai frequently attacked the coastal villages in China. To fight against the pirates, the Ming government constructed a series of fortresses along the coast. In 1394, 2 such fortresses were constructed in the area that's today's Shenzhen, one in Dapeng Peninsula and the other one in Nanshan District. A battalion of around 1,000 soldiers was stationed in each of the fortresses.
This is the southern gate of the fortress. There is a house atop the gate. According to my past experience in similar fortresses, there should have been an arch outside the gate as an extra layer of defense.
I'll use this better preserved coastal fortress to demonstrate it. Outside the gate, there is a barbican. That's what I meant by arch. When invaders break into the barbican, both the doors would be shut and defenders could attack the invaders from above. Next to the gate of the fortress, there is a protruding section of wall. What is that?
This protruding section on the fortress wall is called Ma Mian, horse face. It's designed for defenders to monitor the exterior of the fortress.
Usually, the exterior side of the wall is a blind zone, but it can be seen from the protruding platform. This structure dates back 2 millennia in China. The name horse face was from someone who thought it looked like the face of a horse. Horse face were usually built in the corners and near the gate of the fortress. The area outside the gate is under surveillance. When invaders arrive, defenders could shoot them from their back. Usually, the stairs next to the fortress gate lead to the fortress wall. Unfortunately, we can't see the wall here because it has been demolished. In a coastal fortress, the wall, gate, and the barbican outside the gate are all connected. The wall of the fortress consists of terraced tracks, and on the top terrace, a wall called Daughter Wall. In the northeast corner of Fort Dapeng, a section of the wall still exists. Although it's covered by bushes, with some imagination, we can still figure out terraced tracks. The wall kind of sprawls along the slope of the landscape. Walking on the wall of the coastal fortress was a memorable experience for me. The unique view was, of course, the ocean outside the fortress. Unfortunately, visitors can't have that experience in Fort Dapeng. Originally, outside the southern gate of Fort Dapeng was also a beach, and it was the training ground for the battalion stationed inside. But it has been turned into a residential area, and only a narrow portion of the beach is kept. What's also kept is the name training ground. The name of the beach, 叫长尾, was from that. Near 100 fortresses along the coast formed the coastal Great Wall of China in the 14th century. Along with the construction of the coastal Great Wall was the sea ban policy. All foreign trade had to be conducted through official tribute missions. Private foreign trade was declared illegal. Only Guangzhou port was open for tribute missions. Other ports were demolished. Initially, the sea ban was not implemented strictly. Private trade was prosperous. But the sea ban was tightened up in Ming Dynasty and Qing Dynasty. Like the Great Wall of China built in the mountains, the coastal Great Wall also had beacon towers. Each fortress had 5 to 6 affiliated beacon towers built in the neighboring hills. They were used to transfer military intelligence. Each beacon tower had 5 to 8 soldiers to station, and the soldiers came from the affiliated battalion. When enemies were spotted during the daytime, smoke would be set. If it happened at night, fires would be lit. This way, the battalion stationed in the fortress could prepare for the battles in advance. This beacon tower belonged to the battalion stationed in Fort Dongguan. It's this bigger circle in the picture. It actually was not significantly bigger than Fort Dapeng, but its importance largely surpassed the latter one since late 16th century. In 1573, the Ming government established the Xin'an County that covered most of today's Shenzhen and the entire Hong Kong. Its government was located in Fort Dongguan. No one would believe a county government looked like this. The government of Xi'an County actually consisted of a complex of buildings with different functions, but they were all demolished. All old buildings inside this fortress were demolished in the 1980s when economic reform started in Shenzhen. Back at that time, the entire focus of the society was on economic development. No one cared about relics or history. Xi'an County was ill-fated. It was abolished in 1662 due to the evacuation policy implemented by the Qing government. In 1644, the Manchu troops breached the Shanghai Pass and conquered Beijing, where they established the last dynasty of China, the Qing Dynasty. But in South China, they faced strong resistance from a group of Han Chinese who fled to Taiwan Island after being defeated in the mainland. In order to cut off the supply of food and necessities to Taiwan, the Qing government ordered residents living within up to 25 kilometers from the coast of the mainland to be evacuated inland. The coast of the country became empty in a week. Since 2/3 of Xi'an County's territory was within the evacuation area, the county was merged into the neighboring county. Buildings inside the fortresses were demolished, residents evacuated. When the evacuation policy was abolished 20 years later, most of those evacuated never returned. They died of famine or disease on the road. To recruit people to reclaim the large amount of wasteland in the coastal area, the Qing government offered favorable policies. Many Hakka living in the hilly area in North Guangdong province migrated here. Xi'an County was re-established and recovered its vitality. Fort Dongguan gradually evolved into an urban city where hotels and business associations were built and a large marketplace emerged. It became the Nantou town. Fort Dapeng, however, was a different story. With pressures from Western countries that were more and more active in Far East, the Qing government reinforced this fortress. A battalion of Navy was stationed here. In the center of the fortress, there's a building with a very unique shape. It was built during that time.
This is the center of Dapeng Fortress. It was the brain of the fortress. It's where important buildings were located. The one behind me was the granary for the brigade stationed at the fortress. And the house in front of it was even more important.
I had never seen such a building in other similar coastal fortress. I'm grateful it's well preserved. Now it's an exhibition center about coastal defense and the Opium War.
This garden in front of the granary was the site of the commanding center of Dapeng Fortress, and it was even beyond that. In 1831, Dapeng Brigade was divided into two. The left brigade continued stationing in Dapeng Fortress, and the right brigade was shifted to the Dongchong Fortress near today's Hong Kong International Airport. 9 years after that, in 1840, a new position was created to command both the left brigade in Dapeng Fortress and the right brigade in Dongchong Fortress. And that commander worked right here in Dapeng Fortress.
The office of the commander was responsible for the coastline from Dapeng Bay all the way to the east side of the Pearl River estuary. The defense of this section of coastline faced a huge challenge from the Great Britain in the 19th century. After the British occupied Hong Kong Island in 1841, the frontier was shifted to the Kowloon Peninsula. In 1847, the office of commander was shifted from Fort Dapeng to a fortress in the Kowloon Peninsula, which later became the Kowloon Walled City. The right battalion stationed in Fort Dongchong was also shifted there. When we look at the map of Fort Dapeng, we can find 6 mansions whose owner had the last name Lai.
5 of the mansions of the Lai clan are located on the street. They belong to 3 generations of this clan. The Lai clan were Hakka who migrated to the Dapeng coast after the evacuation. This clan prospered via military career. The most famous one was the owner of this house, General Lai Enjue.
The glory of this clan started from Lai Enjue's grandfather, who became a grade 2 military official. His father, uncle, and brother were also top officials in the military. He was a high-level commander in Dapeng Battalion. In 1839, The Dapeng Battalion, led by Lion Jue, fought back a British vessel led by Charles Elliot in the Kowloon Bay. Lion Jue was awarded the warrior title by the Qing court for his courageous performance. But Lion Jue wasn't able to revert the course of the history. A year later, with the approval of the British Parliament, Charles Elliot led a fleet of 40 vessels and launched the First Opium War. In 1842, the Qing government was forced to sign the Nanjing Treaty, in which Hong Kong Island was officially ceded. China entered the century of humiliation. General Lion Jue died in sorrow in 1848. Before his death, he told his family he hated the corrupt government and he wished Hong Kong could be recovered. General Lai didn't see the worst. In 1860, Kowloon Peninsula was ceded according to Beijing Treaty signed after the Second Opium War. And in 1898, the new territories were also leased to the British. The poor Xi'an County was left with 1/3 of its territory once again. A few years later, the government was moved out of the Nantou town and the county was renamed Bao'an County. In June 1997, a few days before the handover ceremony of Hong Kong, descendants of the Lai clan returned to their ancestral house in Fort Dapeng. They performed the worshipping ritual at the tomb of Lion Jue outside the fortress, informing him of the good news. A plaque that reads, "The will of our ancestor has been fulfilled," was hung on the wall. There were many factors that contributed to China's declining. In my opinion, the root problem was the isolation starting from the sea-ban policy and worsening with the sea-ban tighten up. The isolation made China disconnected from the world and thus missed the scientific breakthrough during the era of Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution that made Great Britain a global power. China, meanwhile, remained a backward agrarian nation in the 19th century and even in the 20th century. It wasn't until 40 years ago, when China implemented the opening up policy, that the Dow situation was reversed. But China is still paying the debt on the semiconductor and other technologies it missed due to the isolation from the 1950s to 1970s. So if only one lesson is allowed to draw, I would say never disconnect from the world again. Keep doing business with global partners and keep an open mind with the latest ideas. Half a century ago, one street in Shenzhen witnessed the worst imbalance of economic development. On one side was great prosperity, and on the other side, people lived in deep poverty. Residents on the poor side tried every method to enter the other side. It was not a coincidence that China's economic reform started in Shenzhen. It was inspired by Hong Kong's economic success. Witnessing residents crushing the border, Chinese leaders realized there's no other choice but to initiate economic reform. A special economic zone was set up. In next video, I'll visit boundary street of Shenzhen and Hong Kong and review this part of history. There is a Hakka village on the Shenzhen side, and the residents were authentic coastal Hakka. I'm Yan Yan. I make videos about sites of interest in China and histories and stories behind them. Subscribe to my channel. I'll see you next time.